Hey everybody, it's good to have you guys in another video, and I will tell you this right now. This video is going to be packed to the brim with information that you will need to be successful with voice AI. Now, most of you right now are probably running campaigns at the moment with voice AI, but I will assure you that there's mainly some things that you might be missing that will be covered inside of this video in detail. So with that being said, I'm going to be mainly focusing on the key features, the key pillars of voice AI, so that way you are able to implement it for yourself or for other clients as you see will. Now, if you are using voice AI to generate leads, book appointments, or close deals, but you're not getting the results that you want, essentially this video is for you. So I'm going to be breaking down the best possible voice AI campaign structures that ensure higher answer rates, better engagement and conversions, fewer hang-up and objections, more book calls and sales, and more leads recovered. So all of these 5 points I will make sure that you're able to attain by the end of the video. So how are we going to do this? Right? We are first going to be going over the 6 main pillars of what makes a good 6-figure voice AI campaign, right? And I'm not talking smack. Basically, I have ran so many campaigns to this point where I know basically what works and what doesn't, and I've seen so many meetings booked from voice AI that I can assure you that these methods do work. Okay, so first of all, we will start with the first pillar, which is call output workflow, post call data extraction workflow. So essentially these two workflows are the first pillar that will allow you to be able to make very successful campaigns. Now, what are these workflows? So let's first start off with the call output workflow. The call output workflow is basically going to be an automation that is capable of following up with the user. So it'll first off initiate the main call that you'll be making with this user. It'll only make calls throughout business hours. And then obviously this workflow will allow you to follow up with the user depending on the time frames that you give the assistant to follow up at. So for example, if you wanted to call at 9 a.m., if you wanted to call at 6 p.m., however it is, you're able to follow up with that user after, months on end. You know what I mean? So you want to make sure that you have this workflow set in place. And this is going to be your main pillar for launching calls, right? So there's 2 main pillars for this first pillar here. So you are going to have the call output workflow, which is where we make all the calls. And then in the second one, you're going to be doing post call data extractions. So what does this mean? Now we're going to go into detail with it. This basically means that in this workflow, you're going to be able to extract data, as it says in the name, from the call itself. So post call, after the call, data extraction, extracting data from the call. Okay, so that is basically what this workflow means. Now, how do we do this? You're basically going to be able to gather whether the person answered the call, didn't answer the call, as in like reached voicemail or no answer, had do not disturb on, however it is, and then or the call failed. Okay, so these 3 options are basically what can happen. There's no other thing that can happen when making a phone call. All right, so what happens if they answered? If they answered, essentially you're going to be getting variables. Like for example, they were interested in booked an appointment, interested in didn't book an appointment, not interested, turned on do not disturb. However it is that you do with your info extractors for your voice AI, you want to make sure that you include inside of this workflow, right? So that way you can add them into dashboards, which we'll talk about shortly. All right, so essentially this is the first pillar. We talked about those 2 workflows that are going to serve a key point for your voice AI campaign. Okay, now we can go into the second pillar, which is how to structure conversations to keep prospects engaged. So keeping prospects engaged. How do we do this, right? How do we ensure that the voice AI knows what they're talking about every single time? So there's 3 things that I have noticed do the best inside of voice AI prompting, right? One thing is past interaction identifier, right? So what does this mean? What are past interactions? So essentially, if you call somebody initially with a voice AI, what do we store from that call, right? We store a transcript of the call. Now, from that transcript of that call, you would essentially be able to plug that transcript inside of the next call of the voice AI that the voice AI will make as a variable, and it will be able to read what the conversation was about before, right? So essentially, you would have the voice AI know all the past interactions that you even had with this person. You could do this with an SMS transcript. You do this with an email transcript, or maybe even a call summary. However you really want to do it, just know that you can store this information inside of the prompt, which would then give leeway to the voice AI assistant. Now, what else, right? There's also another section, so it's just custom actions. actions. Now, with custom actions, you are basically able to gather all of the information from the user inside of whatever CRM you're storing them in. So this means usually with Synthflow, which is the platform that I'm currently using to make these voice AIs, inside of Synthflow, we have a predetermined template of a custom action called Get User Preferences from GoHighLevel, which is where we search the user inside of GoHighLevel, and essentially we just pull up that information from that user by just using their phone number. So this means that you can call a voice AI, like an inbound call, for example, and that voice AI will use that API, and the voice AI will know everything about you already by just you calling, which is absolutely insane. So that's another thing that you can do to improve structures of the conversation. And then of course, we're going to be talking about the voice as well. So the voice basically gives personality to the assistant. This is how the assistant is able to express emotions. Like, are they urgent? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they mad? Do they have a different tonality to them, right? This all depends on the voice. There's only a limited amount of things that you can do for the stability and all that stuff inside of, just normal settings. It really all depends on how that voice was recorded initially. Think about it like this. If you clone your own voice and you're yelling at the top of your lungs every time, you are going to get a clone voice of a person yelling, right? So essentially it's the same thing with the personalities of these voices, okay? So the best voice you pick, obviously the more optimized and the better the performance is going to be for that voice AI. Now, lastly, there are slang skills. So what I do to teach my voice AIs slang is I basically go over to GPT, or I go over to Claude, or I even use DeepSeek, which is a new one, and I basically create multiple different types of slang that I could then teach the voice AI to use throughout the call. So it doesn't say things like awesome or great, or it just things that usually the voice AI is trained to say. It says things like or so that way it makes the conversation more humanized. So this is it for the second pillar. We can go ahead and start working on memory prompting, which is the third pillar. Now, for memory prompting, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. However, memory prompting basically means that you're teaching the voice AI to memorize everything that happens throughout the conversation using quote unquote variables, right? Which are between just brackets normally. And with these brackets, let's just use an example, right? If I ask the interest of a person that, we're calling for an outbound campaign, right? Hey, are you interested in this? If they say yes or no, we would record that response in between brackets. So say record this response as interest in between brackets. Okay. So with that bracket, we could then use that bracket throughout the conversation. So that way we can make responses more personalized to the user that we're calling, right? So this means if there's any reason to bring up interest for, let's say, an objection, let's say somebody objects, is like, I don't know about it, I have to think about this, right? Then I basically teach the voice AI to say something along the lines of the interest, which is obviously the memory prompting. So now it will state to the user something along the lines of, well, you said that you're interested because of this. Is that still not a priority for you? You see what I mean? So this is what memory prompting does for your voice AI assistants. So that way it's capable of increasing the performance by a long shot. Okay. So now we can move on to the fourth pillar. And the fourth pillar is follow-up systems. So why are follow-up systems important, right? I'm going to be going over no-shows, appointment reminders, and reach voicemail follow-ups, right? So we'll start off with the first one, which is no-shows. Essentially, if you're booking everybody into an appointment and they don't show up to the appointment, you want a voice AI to follow up with them. That's just really how it is and how it should be. If you have a VA right now that might be taking your calls and then obviously following up with people that don't show up, you could use the voice AI to do the same exact thing, right? Essentially, this makes things easier on your end because it can just book them back into your system, right? To your CRM, wherever you have it, and then make things easier so that way you don't even have to follow up with them if they no show, right? And you could even add this as like a email, SMS, and voice AI campaign. You can get creative with it. So there's so many ways to go about it. But secondly, right, we have appointment reminders. So it's basically the same thing as no shows. We send appointment reminders to basically anybody that books an appointment, but this is just an extra addition that you can have a voice AI call that person. And I actually have this for myself, and it's confirmed like a lot of appointments, like hundreds of appointments already, with me having to do nothing. And it increased my show up rate by 70%. And I made a whole video about it as well. So essentially with this voice AI, it's able to confirm, cancel, or reschedule users that booked an appointment with me. And it calls them a day before the appointment to make sure that they're good for tomorrow, right? So essentially that's really how it is for me. and what I believe is the best way to go about it with these campaigns that we're building out. But that leads me into my last point, which is reached voicemail follow-ups, right? So if a user reaches voicemail, essentially you want to go ahead and follow up with that person via SMS, email, and voice AI. That's just really how it is. If somebody reached voicemail, you also want to leave them a voicemail, right? So that's just another thing. So for example, if I called a user and that user that was in my campaign reached the call reached a voicemail, I want to send him a voicemail, basically myself, with the voice of the voice AI. I want to send them an SMS. I want to send them an email. And if they reply to those SMSs or emails, I then send a voice AI to call them again, right? Just get creative with it. That's really how I do it from my end. All right. So that leads me into the A/B testing, right? So essentially with the A/B testing strategies, I test two things, right? I test the scripts and I test the voices. So you guys understand how A/B testing works. Basically, you split the campaign in half. You have one side testing one voice, another side testing another voice, and then you measure results between the two. So that way you're able to keep the best performing one, and then you can split test with another voice, making sure you find the best one, and then eventually you're going to have one of the best voices that you see the best performance at, depending on your industry. So you do the same exact thing for scripts as well, so that way you have the best performing script. Okay, so this is a crucial part basically of running these campaigns and getting them to six-figure campaigns, because if you don't have them this way, pretty much you're throwing away money, just putting it simply. So this leads me into my last pillar, which is dashboards, right? How are you tracking every single one of these calls, and what are you doing with that track, with all the metrics that you track? So in that second workflow that I mentioned in the first pillar, which is post-call data extraction, you are essentially getting the interested in book deployment, interested in didn't book appointment, and all that stuff, right? So you can create a dashboard from those branches, and then you will be able to send weekly reports to yourself, so that way you are able to track all key metrics. You can get way more into depth with this as well, just so you know. Like, you can basically grade these calls. You can have a GPT see each call and see if there was anything that went wrong inside of the call itself, and that way it can notify you if something went wrong, and so on and so forth. But you can get very, very, very creative with this. Just do keep in mind that you need dashboards. You need to see what's going on with your metrics, how many you converted, how many you converted this month, last month, and so on and so forth. But with that being said, I do appreciate you guys even watching this video, and I do want to say that we have this amazing community of people just like you who are looking to learn about voice AI. It's called the AI Agency Vault. You guys should definitely join up. Essentially, I teach you over there. I have free courses, I have paid courses, I have everything that you need, so that way you are able, I even have snapshots, so that way you are able to go in there, right, and start creating your voice AI journey. It's really, there's already around 300 people that are already inside, and each and every single one of them are taking advantage of it and asking me questions almost every single day. So please join up. I will go ahead and greet you personally, and I am definitely excited to have you guys in there. So that being said, please leave a subscribe down below. I really appreciate it. At the end of the day, it helps you yourself, because I bring more content for you if you subscribe. So thanks again for watching, fellas, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.